Welcome back to Goodnight Lighthouse. I'm Miss Dorothy, and I'm here to read you a story. And I've got a really interesting book tonight. Now, you remember I told you that my sister Marion gave me a big box of books, right? Well, I found another one that I thought was interesting. It's got an interesting title, it's got an interesting story, and I think you're going to like it. This book is called Sandman in the Lighthouse. Sandman in the Lighthouse. Well, I thought that was great since this is Goodnight Lighthouse, that we read a book about a lighthouse. But what I really wanted to tell you about was the Sandman. Now, when I was a little girl, my mom made up a story about a Sandman, and she would use it to get me to go to bed. She would tell me that when I started to fall asleep, the Sandman would come around and sprinkle sand in my eyes to make me close my eyes and want to go to sleep. It was just a made-up story, but it was fun, and it made me go to sleep. And that's what this book is about. It's about the Sandman that travels around the world sprinkling sand so kids will go to sleep. But in this book, something happens to the Sandman, and he can't get to the kids. So the kids don't go to sleep. It's kind of crazy, it's kind of fun, and I think you'll like it, especially since it has a lighthouse in it, and we love lighthouses. Now, this book was written by Rudi Strahl. He wrote the book, he drew these interesting pictures of the Sandman and the Sandman's friends. This is going to be a fun book. We need to open it up, we need to get inside, we need to see what happens to the Sandman, and find out if the kids ever get to go to sleep. Are you ready? Good. I need you to sit up and listen up, because here we go. Lighthouse keeper Jack Tar lived on an island in the middle of the sea with his little boy, John. Every evening, the Sandman visited the island to send John to sleep. The Sandman had a little boat. It had a mast and a sail, a rudder to steer it, and a lead weight for measuring the depth of the water. The Sandman always measured the depth of the water along the lighthouse rock while John was having his supper. You see that little boat? That's carrying the Sandman. He's headed to the island and to the lighthouse. Usually the sea was calm and flat. One day, however, there was a storm. The wind blew and the sea was rough. The little boat ran before the storm while the Sandman held on to his hat. There were huge waves, and the lighthouse was still a long way off. It was beginning to get dark, too. Luckily, a friendly whale came swimming by and showed the Sandman the way. They reached the lighthouse, and the whale swam away again. "Thank you," shouted the Sandman. Then he tied up his boat and jumped ashore. Suddenly, an enormous wave picked up the Sandman's boat, tossed it into the air, and dashed it down again onto the sharp rocks. The little boat broke in two, the sail blew away, and the lead weight sank straight to the bottom of the sea. A bit of the mast floated by, and then the boat was gone. A shark ate the Sandman's sack of sand. The Sandman stood and watched in horror, water running out of his shoes. Up in the lighthouse, the light was on, and John was just saying, "The Sandman isn't here yet. Do you think he'll come today?" "In this storm? With a sea like this?" said the lighthouse keeper, shaking his head. "The Sandman's not much of a sailor, you know." John's waiting for the Sandman, but Dad doesn't think he's going to get there. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. "Come in," shouted John. He was sure it must be the Sandman. And it was. The Sandman came in and told them what had happened. "Stay here," said John. "You can sleep in my bed." "No, I can't do that," said the Sandman. "I have to go on, or none of the children will ever get to sleep." "That would never do," Jack Tar agreed. "We must get you back to the land again at once." But the sea was still stormy, and the wind was blowing harder than ever. By this time, the whole world had heard the news. Everywhere alarm bells were ringing and sirens were hooting. The fire brigade and the police and the soldiers and the pilots were all busy looking for him. Where could the Sandman be? All over the world, children put down their toys and began looking for the Sandman. They searched deserts and cities. They searched the North Pole and the Indian jungle. But no one could find the Sandman anywhere because all the time he was on a rock in the middle of the sea with lighthouse keeper Jack Tar and his little boy, John. They were racking their brains for a way to get the Sandman back to land again, but none of them could think of an idea. Then John's sharp ears caught the hum of an airplane engine. He ran out the door. Up in the sky, a pilot had just sighted the lighthouse through a strong pair of binoculars. "Come here, Sandman," shouted John. The Sandman ran out and jumped up and down, but he was so small that the pilot did not see him. John's face fell, but the lighthouse keeper raced upstairs to the big light and began flashing distress signals. The pilot saw the signals. He sent a message back to the land saying, "Sandman found." The news was announced on the radio, and soon everyone knew that the Sandman was stranded on a rock in the middle of the sea. Immediately, ships came hurrying over the sea to rescue the Sandman. Ooh, look at all those ships. They raced through the night. There were steamers and yachts, a tug, and an old cargo boat. Everybody was rushing to rescue the Sandman. The whale, who was still swimming about, hurried out of the way. Soon Jack Tar, John, and the Sandman could see the colored lights of all the ships coming toward the island. The sailors lowered their boats and tried to row to the lighthouse, but the sea was still too rough. They would have to try another way to rescue the Sandman. From the old cargo boat, they began firing rockets with ropes tied to them. The Sandman caught one of the ropes. "Haul it in!" shouted Jack Tar. He pulled the stout cable through the sea and made it fast to the lighthouse. Then the sailors sent a breeches buoy over to the cable. They wanted to pull the Sandman back in the breeches buoy. But when the Sandman got into the breeches, they were much too large for him. "Now what shall we do?" asked lighthouse keeper Jack Tar. They tried to put the Sandman in that really big pair of pants, but he was too small. They still could not get him back to the boat. The pilot had an idea. He flew away and came back with a tailor who dropped from an airplane in a parachute. He's dropping a tailor down. A tailor is someone who makes clothes. The brave tailor landed safely on the lighthouse rock. He set to work at once. He measured and snipped and stitched busily, and soon he made the Sandman a little pair of breeches. Look at those tiny little pants the sailor made. Those should fit the Sandman. The Sandman said, "Thank you very much," to the tailor and Jack Tar. Before he left, he sent John to sleep. Then he climbed into the breeches and was pulled along the cable to the old cargo boat. There he goes. The sailors shouted, "Hip, hip, hooray!" The captain looked at his compass and cried, "Alter course! Full steam ahead!" All the ships sailed away from the lighthouse again. The storm had died down now, and the man in the moon came out to watch them. All over the world, children were shouting for joy because the Sandman would soon be back. Their mothers were glad too, because that meant the children were going to go to sleep. The Sandman came ashore, found his little car, and climbed in.
Oh dear, he cried. I need some new sand. The blue shark ate up my sand when my boat was wrecked. At once the wind came whistling through the night to help, bringing the Sandman an enormous mountain of sand. The Sandman went all over the world, east, west, north, and south, and everywhere he scattered sand, the children's eyes closed, and they fell asleep. When did all this happen? Not so very long ago. That night when you were in bed and you couldn't get to sleep, because all the time the Sandman was on a rock in the middle of the sea with lighthouse keeper Jack Tar and his little boy.
Well, I told you that was a fun book, and it really was. Lots of crazy stuff happened. The Sandman got stuck on the island, and he was in the lighthouse, and the kids couldn't go to sleep, and everybody was trying to get the Sandman off that island so the kids would go to sleep. And finally, they figured out how to do it with the help of little Jack, and then the Sandman got back on his route, putting the kids to sleep. That was a lot of fun. I really liked it. I think one of my favorite parts was right here where it says, "When did all this happen? Not very long ago, that night that you were in bed and couldn't go to sleep." Yeah, they want to pretend that that night you couldn't sleep was the same night the Sandman was stuck on the island. Could have been, right? This was a lot of fun. I'm glad my sister gave me this box of books. And now it's your turn. You need to give Miss Dorothy a book. What am I going to read next? I've practically gone through that whole box. Now I need to know what story you want me to read. Send Miss Dorothy a note. Let me know your favorite book. I'll go find it, we'll read it, and I'll call out your name. That'll be a lot of fun. I love when we get together. It makes me so happy. But now it's time to go to sleep. And we need to pray before we go to sleep. And I want to thank God for the restful night's sleep He gives us every single night. So let's talk to God, okay? Fold your hands and close your eyes. Pray with Miss Dorothy. Dear God, thank you for the comfortable beds that we have to sleep in. Thank you for the way you watch over us and keep us safe. Thank you for our moms and dads who are here to make us feel safe. Now, help us to get a good night's sleep. Please watch over our families and our friends, all the people that we love. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, little Sandman, off to bed. Time to close those eyes, whether there's sand in them or not, and get a good night's sleep. Cuddle up, curl up, get under those covers. Give mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, your babysitter, who's ever there with you, lots of hugs and kisses. And whatever you do, obey and obey right away. And then come back and see Miss Dorothy. I'm going to be sitting right here, ready to read another story to you. See you real soon. Bye.